You've been swindled by Hollywood and clickbait conspiracy nuts. They've sold you the lie that the moon is a barren ghost town with zero proof of humanity's footprint. But that's a lunar flat-out fabrication, cooked up by sci-fi flicks and paranoid blogs. Some people actually swallow the myth that nothing survives on the moon, that you can't even bounce lasers off it because all traces vanished. Remember the 1970s thriller Capricorn 1? It relentlessly peddled Apollo as a gigantic hoax, convincing whole generations to doubt history. Here's the hard truth reel. Physical mirrors, retroreflectors still sit on the lunar surface, planted by Apollo astronauts and Soviet probes in the late 20th century. Apollo 11's 1970 mirror panel still catches laser beams today. Still skeptical? Dive into the 80s era physical review letters, where scientists detail this laser bouncing like a precision sport. Even in the 21st century, places like Apache Point Observatory keep pinging those reflectors, tracking the moon's exact millimeter drift. If you believe the moon is just a lifeless rock, congrats, you fell for a deception so absurd, it makes CGI in summer blockbusters look state-of-the-art. Next time a denier dismisses Apollo, ask them why NASA keeps snapping laser selfies from lunar mirrors decades later. While lasers bouncing off the moon prove a physical interaction, the movement of the flag suggests atmospheric conditions that need closer examination. You've been duped by conspiracy forums and every lazy cable documentary out there. That fluttering flag on the moon didn't prove wind unless your science was taught by flat earthers. The real shocker in lunar history. Classic physics, not a secret breeze. People scream, the flag waved, so there must have been wind on the moon. The brutal truth. Space is a vacuum, period. Thanks to grainy Apollo footage from the late 1960s and Hollywood flops like Capricorn 1, the moon breeze myth clings on stubbornly. But here's the cold splash of reality. NASA's 16mm film from Apollo 11 in 1969 shows the flag only moves when astronauts touch it. No breeze. Just Newton's first law, NASA mission transcripts, 1969. The flag's horizontal rod, and the way it was twisted into the surface, NASA technical diagrams from the late 1960s, explain those ripples. No atmosphere needed. If you bought the wind on the moon story, congratulations, you just moonwalked right from science into sci-fi. It's like believing your toaster also doubles as a space heater. Fun to imagine, deadly wrong in reality. Although the flag's motion raises questions about wind, discrepancies in shadows further fuel debates on the authenticity of the lunar footage. Hollywood lied to you, and conspiracy forums doubled down. They want you to swallow the nonsense that every weird shadow on the moon screams fake set in Burbank, not the barren lunar surface. If you bought into those viral Apollo shadow inconsistencies as proof of shoddy special effects, you fell right into a 1990s tabloid TV trap that's now running wild on YouTube echo chambers. Here's the unbreakable truth. NASA's Apollo photos show strange shadow angles because the moon's jagged landscape hills, craters, and ridges distorts light, confirmed by Surveyor 7's unmanned lunar pics from 1968. Basic geometry crushes the spotlight studio myth. Dr. James Oberg, a Cold War-era space analyst, proved Earth mountains cast the exact same tricky shadows. Just browse Everest expedition shots. If weird shadows supposedly debunk the moon landings, then a Halloween pumpkin's crooked grin is the CIA's smoking gun. Trust shadow nonsense. You'd fail a geometry test for tweens. Similarly, inconsistencies like mismatched shadows lead some to question why no stars appear in the lunar photos. Hollywood lied to you every time you saw those missing star and space photo conspiracies. If you believed NASA staged the moon landings because you didn't see twinkling constellations in every Apollo shot, you fell for decades-old tabloid trash and lazy documentaries desperate for views. This nonsense blew up in the 1970s, fueled by clueless TV shows that ignored basic photography science. Here's the reality. The astronauts' Hasselblad cameras had to use lightning-fast exposures to avoid overexposing the blinding lunar surface, so stars vanish completely. Don't take my word for it. Check NASA's 1960s photography manuals. Need proof on Earth? Try snapping a quick pic at a night football game. 0 stars, exactly as National Geographic's 20th century field guides explain. So if you think no stars means faked, I've got a Mars bridge with invisible stars to sell you right next to Bigfoot's spaceship. The absence of stars in images is paralleled by the seemingly unnatural, slow-motion movements of the astronauts. You've been outright duped by Hollywood, internet conspiracy nuts, and that uncle who binges late-night pseudoscience TV. Whenever someone claims Apollo astronauts were just wire-rigged actors filmed in slow motion, they're asking you to trust 70s special effects over NASA's cutting-edge tech and real physics. The myth. The moon landings were shot in a studio bouncing astronauts hooked up to wires, miracle lighting, straight out of a Stanley Kubrick fever dream. Films like Capricorn 1, sensational 70s TV documentaries, and endless YouTube rants push this nonsense, as if Kubrick secretly doubled as NASA's stunt coordinator. But here's the unmissable twist. Apollo 17 footage from 1972 shows lunar dust arcing perfectly through the air, something absolutely impossible to fake under Earth's gravity using wires. Plus, MIT research from the 70s analyzed astronaut hops and found they matched lunar gravity equations down to the decimal. So if you still buy the Hollywood wire theory, congratulations, NASA didn't land on the moon, it was just Carl from Props playing astronaut. If you believed this, it's time to update your facts, not your film theories. Just as the slow-motion hopping appears staged, the lack of a blast crater beneath the lunar module raises further doubts. You've been fed a moon-sized lie by YouTube researchers, and conspiracy documentaries the missing lunar blast crater supposedly proves the moon landing was faked. Spoiler, they're dead wrong again. Thanks to late-night cable specials and endless clickbait, everyone thinks the lunar module should have left a giant, flaming pit on the moon, like Neil Armstrong was starring in a Michael Bay explosion. Here's the brutal truth. NASA's own 1966 report on the lunar module descent propulsion system predicted exactly what we see, just a light dusting, not a volcanic crater, because the engine was deliberately throttled down to avoid lunar chaos. Apollo 11 photos and post-mission reports show exactly the dusty footprints, zero monster blast craters. Astronauts in 1969 witnessed only a thin dust layer, and modern probes like the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter confirm it's always been that way. Still stuck on this? Hollywood owes you a refund, not an engineering degree. In addition to missing physical evidence, photographic details like crosshairs appearing behind objects feed theories of post-production. You've been played hard by internet detectives and conspiracy forums gaslighting you into thinking every UFO photo with a crosshair behind the ship screams, Photoshop fake, case closed. But here's the real trick. This dates back to analog film and the sun itself. This myth exploded in the early 2000s, fueled by UFO message boards, viral YouTube debunkers flashing smug grins, and a Reddit army that never touched a darkroom. The claim: if a reticle looks like it's behind an object, it's proof of fakery. But dig into the Apollo-era originals. NASA's own Apollo Lunar Surface Journal is packed with 1969 Hasselblad images where crosshairs disappear behind the moon, suits, or flags. Hasselblad camera manuals from the 1970s explain it clearly. Overexposure on blazing white surfaces makes reticles vanish on film. So, unless you believe NASA had time-traveling Photoshop in 1969, congrats, you just got fooled by physics, not fakery. What's next? Claiming rainbows are CGI like a digital lens flare. Beyond photographic anomalies, concerns extend to the astronauts' safety, such as the lack of adequate radiation shielding. You've been duped by conspiracy forums and late-night TV hacks, supposedly. Every Apollo astronaut should have been nuked like a microwave burrito. But here's the raw truth. NASA kept exact records, and those moonwalkers returned far less crispy than you've been told. The big lie. The Van Allen radiation belts are instant death traps for Apollo crews. This myth exploded thanks to fear-mongering YouTubers in the early 2000s and sci-fi writers who've obviously never handled a Geiger counter. The facts: NASA's dosimeters flew on every mission, showing astronauts absorbed radiation doses comparable to a few medical 10 rays. This isn't fake news, it's straight from NASA's radiation protection guidance from the 1970s. Apollo's spacecraft blasted through the belts on a precise, shallow trajectory, cutting exposure to mere minutes, backed by detailed calculations in the 1969 mission reports. No glowing astronauts came home. A Smithsonian study in 2015 confirmed zero increased radiation effects. Still freaking out? Your yearly dental 10 rays pack a stronger punch. If you bought into the Van Allen belts as a death ray, congrats, you just swallowed pure Netflix science nonsense. These health concerns dovetail with claims that the televised landing footage was orchestrated by filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick. You've been conned by Hollywood again. If you believe Stanley Kubrick filmed the moon landing, you're just handing cash to the conspiracy concession stand. Blame Tinseltown and clickbait documentaries for this wild fantasy, not NASA's entire budget. Fans love whispering that Kubrick, the mastermind behind 2001: A Space Odyssey, faked Apollo 11's giant leap for mankind. This myth blew up in the 1970s, fueled by cheesy mockumentaries like Dark Side of the Moon and late-night talkers with tinfoil hats tighter than actual astronaut helmets. Want real proof? In 1970, Kubrick was celebrating the 3rd anniversary of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Busy boring every interviewer, see American cinematographer, 1970, not sneaking onto NASA's soundstage. And that spooky room 237 in The Shining. In Stephen King's original 1977 novel, it's just room 217. NASA's declassified Apollo footage Smithsonian. Apollo cameras. 2004 nails it. They used custom technology, not leftover Hollywood props. If you fell for Kubrick faking it, you might as well believe Quentin Tarantino's World War II is a documentary. Compounding suspicions are the missing tapes, which some believe hide crucial evidence of a staged event. Hollywood lied to you. Lost footage doesn't mean hidden secrets. It screams sloppy bookkeeping. If you bought into the hype that every missing tape is a massive cover-up, you've been played. The paranoia exploded thanks to Oliver Stone's JFK in the early 1990s and a nationwide army of Reddit detectives. But here's the brutal truth: TV broadcasters and studios routinely erased or reused tapes to save money and shelf space. The BBC wiped entire Doctor Who seasons in the 1970s for pure practicality. BBC archive policy, 1960s to 70s. NASA even lost the original moon landing footage, not some cloak and dagger operation, but simple misplacement. NASA press release, 2006. If you think missing tapes mean deep state plots, you probably freak out every time your AirPods disappear. Reality check: most lost reels are collecting dust in junk closets, not locked away in secret bunkers. The absence of records fuels skepticism about whether the technology available in the 60s was sufficient for such a mission. You've been conned. Hollywood's flashy lies and conspiracy keyboard warriors twisting the truth. The myth that 60s technology couldn't land us on the moon. Absolute nonsense, not science. If you believed your smartphone's Candy Crush skills make you a tech genius, guess what? The Apollo engineers with slide rules from the 1960s would mock you hard while you fumble with Google Maps. Hollywood and internet experts push the fantasy that Apollo's computers were glorified toasters barely doing basic math. Reality check: MIT's Apollo guidance computer, developed in the 1960s, was a breakthrough pioneer of integrated circuits, literally the foundation your iPhone stands on. MIT Instrumentation Lab Manual, 1965. NASA's own 1969 transcripts prove astronauts used custom-coded software, real-time sensor data, and ironclad backup math. No Wi-Fi, only nerves of steel. Apollo Flight Journal, 1969. That primitive tech let humans manually pilot spacecraft. Try doing that with your self-driving Tesla. Still think the moon landings were a hoax? Congrats, you just swallowed the tech age version of my laptop crashed, so space travel is impossible. Questions about technology extend to photography, with some arguing the images are too perfect for the equipment used then. Hollywood has fed you a lazy lie about vintage cameras that old photos are too crisp to be real. If you believe this, you've been duped by modern internet skeptics who can't imagine tech working before Instagram or iPhones. People insist antebellum photos should look like a Monet painting after a coffee spill. Blurry ghosts, nothing sharp. Reddit experts and clickbait YouTubers love calling 19th century Civil War shots or Apollo moon images impossibly perfect. Here's the bombshell: Eadweird Muybridge's zoopraxiscope diagrams from the 1870s reveal Victorians obsessed with optical precision. They literally scraped glass plates for sharper images, all documented in surviving engineering blueprints. By the late 1800s, glass negatives outclassed most modern screens for clarity. NASA astronauts in the 1960s trained with custom Hasselblad cameras Built for lunar sharpness, check the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal for proof. If you think old cameras only captured blurry ghosts, congratulations, you bought the flat Earth of photographic history. Maybe today's selfie filters have erased your memory of what true detail looks like expecting a Van Gogh from your iPhone snap. Moreover, the clarity of footprints conflicts with claims that such impressions require wet lunar soil, which is non-existent. You've been flat out lied to again by Hollywood and those sci-fi hacks who couldn't build a sandcastle, let alone land on the moon. They want you imagining astronauts bouncing through a cosmic sandbox where every sharp bootprint springs from some invisible mud puddle, basically. Moon slush. If you believe this, you've been fed pure fiction by movie sets, toy makers, and even misleading 1970s science textbooks that portrayed the moon as a windy dust storm or soggy beach. Here's the brutal truth. NASA's 1960s. Lunar Receiving Laboratory proved completely dry. Lunar regolith actual moon dust holds impressions far better than any Earth sand. Don't take my word for it, check the 1969 Lunar Sample Information Catalog. Moon dust's real trick is electrostatic cling from ultrafine, jagged grains, not moisture. And photos snapped by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2010 show footprints still razor sharp. No mud bath needed. Still picturing a galactic mudroom. Think again, moon dust acts more like powdered Velcro than your beach vacation. If you bought the wet sand story, congrats. You just turned Buzz Aldrin into the grumpiest beachcomber in history. It's like Hollywood tried turning the moon into a cosmic mudslide for their next blockbuster. These physical inconsistencies are compounded by the lack of independent verification from foreign entities. You've been fed an outdated Cold War fairy tale that no foreign country confirmed the Apollo moon landings. Blame internet conspiracy. YouTubers and lazy 90s documentaries, they let this myth linger longer than disco and way past common sense. If you believe the United States strutted onto the moon solo while the whole world just silently nodded, you've been duped. Old space race paranoia recycled by anti-NASA blogs and sensational TV baked this stubborn lie into our brains. Here's the punch. The Soviet Union, the Cold War's fiercest rival, tracked every second of Apollo 11 with their own radar. They never once called foul. Check the Russian Academy of Sciences' detailed logs from 1969. Jodrell Bank Observatory in England recorded the same signals. Their recordings remain public. Australia's Honeysuckle Creek station delivered that iconic moonwalk footage, backed by meticulous logs. Japanese and German university observatories synced transmission delays perfectly to lunar distance. If you seriously believe no one double-checked, you're accusing Soviet scientists, British astronomers, and Australian radio geeks of pulling off a Marvel-level conspiracy. Sorry, but if even your worst enemies confirm your road trip, you probably did leave the driveway. It's like claiming your neighbors all confirmed you threw a party, but you never left your couch. This absence of confirmation is used to argue that all 6 Apollo landings were falsified using identical methods. You've been hoodwinked by conspiracy documentaries and sketchy internet forums. The claim that every single Apollo moon landing was faked in the exact same way is pure, unfiltered fiction. Hollywood and tabloid scammers pulled the strings, and you swallowed the lie whole. If you believed NASA just hit copy-paste on 6 lunar landings, running the same cheap smoke and mirrors act, think again. Films like Capricorn 1 and self-styled experts from the late 20th century pumped this hoax relentlessly, insisting all missions were identical studio productions. Here's your reality check. Every Apollo landing site is meticulously mapped, with abandoned gear clearly photographed by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter in the 2000s. Need more proof? Seismic experiments left on the moon recorded unique data-official lunar seismic readings from the 1970s, verify wildly different local geology each time. Plus, Apollo 11, 14, and 15's retroreflectors still bounce laser beams back perfectly, confirmed by ongoing lunar ranging experiments dating from 1970. If you still think NASA recycled props, you're accusing them of sitcom-level laziness, literally less effort than making a bad TV series, while ignoring decades of ironclad, peer-reviewed science. Finally, despite multiple missions, no Earth-based telescope has ever resolved the purported lunar landing sites, deepening the debate. You've been conned by internet conspiracy hacks and sci-fi flicks alike into believing no Earth telescope could ever spot humanity's footprints on the moon. Hollywood blockbusters and clickbait YouTubers push the lie that Apollo missions just vanished, all for clicks and cash. The lie goes no telescope on Earth can see the Apollo landings, even the world's most powerful, so it's all fake, right? Films like the 1970s thriller Capricorn 1 and endless viral blogs have raked in views by sowing distrust of NASA and every telescope on Earth. Here's the bombshell they hide. Earth's telescopes truly can't resolve those tiny spots. Physics, especially the 19th century diffraction limit, makes it impossible. But starting in 2009, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter began openly releasing razor-sharp orbital photos showing Apollo descent stages and even astronaut footprints. The source: NASA's official public archive, live since 2009. The kicker: amateur space buffs have been analyzing these images since the early 2010s no secret society membership required. If you thought Earth-based scopes alone could disprove Apollo, your knowledge is stuck in dial-up era buffering. Want to see Neil Armstrong's face from your backyard? Might as well ask your smart fridge to write your memoir.